Captain Lee Taemin stood in the middle of the big command room on Earth Space Station looking at the huge screen that showed enemy ships coming toward them. The alien ships looked like dark clouds in space, and they were glowing with scary blue and green lights that made everyone feel afraid. The ships were so many that they covered the stars and made space look empty and cold. Ambassador Kang Sora walked over to stand next to him. She was wearing her best diplomatic uniform, but her hands were shaking a little bit, even though she was trying to look brave. The alien fleet was the biggest anyone had ever seen, and it was coming straight for Earth with weapons that could destroy whole planets. 3 days ago, the Galaxy Council had sent their final message to Earth. The message was simple and clear. Humans had exactly 72 hours to give up their freedom and become slaves under Council rule. The Council said humans were too dangerous and too violent to be left alone. Every other species in the galaxy had already given up and accepted Council control. Now it was humanity time to do the same thing. The Council thought they knew everything about humans. They had studied Earth for 20 years since first contact, and they believed humans would act like every other species they had conquered. The Council was used to species begging for mercy when they showed up with their big fleets. They expected humans to be scared and surrender without fighting, but the Council did not understand humans at all, while other alien species saw the Council as wise rulers who kept peace in the galaxy. Humans saw them as bullies who crushed anyone who wanted to be free. The Council had made a big mistake. They thought humans would be easy to scare. Lieutenant Park Min-soo sat at his computer station, reading all the threatening messages coming from different alien species. The Zenthari said they would bomb Earth cities from space. The Kickstar threatened to cut off all trade with human colonies. The Valnari promised to send their armies to take over human worlds. Each message was meant to make humans afraid and force them to give up instead of being scared. The humans in the command room started to smile as they read the threats. Commander Kim Hae-won laughed out loud when she saw a message from the Zenthari commander. The aliens were about to learn something very important about humans. They were about to find out why humans had survived ice ages, world wars, diseases, and disasters for thousands of years. The Council had no idea that humans had been getting ready for this day since the first alien ship landed on Earth 20 years ago. When the Council first made contact, they told humans that joining the galactic community meant following Council rules, but humans had secretly been preparing for the day when the Council would try to take away their freedom. Dr. Yoon Ji-hai worked in secret laboratories deep under the ground where human scientists had been studying alien technology. For years, they had taken Council science and made it better in ways the aliens never thought possible. Human engineers were different from alien engineers. They did not just copy technology, they improved it and made it stronger. The human military had been training for this war for 2 decades. They had built new ships that looked simple on the outside, but were full of advanced weapons and armor that the Council had never seen. Human soldiers had practiced fighting in alien environments and learned how to use Council weapons better than the aliens who made them. Colonel Cho Dae-hyun walked into the command room carrying a message from Earth government. The message was very short, but it would change galactic history forever. When the aliens read it, they would understand that humans were not like other species. The message would shock the Council and make them realize they had made a terrible mistake. The Council fleet was now close enough to see Earth. The blue and green planet looked small and helpless compared to the massive alien ships that surrounded it. The Council commanders were confident this would be easy. They had done this hundreds of times before. No species had ever said no to the Galaxy Council ambassador. Kang Sora opened the communication channel to speak to the Council fleet. The alien commanders appeared on the screen in their fancy uniforms and medals. They looked proud and sure of themselves. The Supreme Chancellor of the Zenthari spoke first, demanding that humans surrender immediately. The alien leader talked for a long time about how the Council was wise and powerful. He said humans should be grateful to join the galactic community under Council protection. He promised that if humans surrendered now, they would be treated well as long as they followed all Council rules forever. When the alien finished talking, Ambassador Kang looked at Captain Lee Taemin, who nodded his head. She then looked at the message from Earth government and smiled. The whole command room went quiet as everyone waited to hear humanity response to the Council demands. The Message was only 2 words, but those words would echo across the galaxy for generations to come when Ambassador Kang spoke into the microphone. Her voice was calm and clear, even though she knew this meant war. The 2 words she said were simple, but they carried the weight of human history and human spirit. Try us. The alien commanders on the screen looked confused at first. They had expected humans to beg for mercy or ask for more time. Instead, humans had just challenged the most powerful force in the galaxy with 2 simple words. The Council had never heard such a response from any species before. The Supreme Chancellor face turned dark with anger. He could not believe that these primitive humans dared to defy the Galaxy Council. He threatened to destroy every human city and kill every human in the galaxy if they did not surrender immediately. But Captain Lee Tae-min just smiled and closed the communication channel. The Council would learn soon enough that threatening humans was the worst mistake they had ever made. The alien fleet began to move into attack position, not knowing that human forces were already moving to intercept them in secret bases across the solar system. Human ships powered up their engines and activated weapon systems that had been hidden for 20 years. The Council thought they were fighting primitive humans with basic technology. Instead, they were about to face an enemy that had turned their own science against them. The war for galactic freedom was about to begin, and humans were ready. The Council had given humanity a choice between slavery and death, but humans had chosen a third option that the Council never expected. They had chosen to fight back and win. The galaxy was about to learn that humans did not just refuse to be conquered. They refused to let anyone else be conquered either. The Council ultimatum had failed, and now they would pay the price for underestimating the species that had never learned how to quit. The Council ships moved into attack formation around Earth like hungry wolves circling their prey. Supreme Chancellor Velthera of the Zenthari had taken personal command of the invasion fleet because she wanted to crush the human rebellion herself. She had destroyed dozens of rebellious worlds before, and she thought this would be just another easy victory. The alien commander could not believe that humans had dared to say no to the Galaxy Council. For over 1,000 years, every species in the galaxy had bowed down when the Council showed up with their mighty fleets. No one had ever been stupid enough to challenge their power until Naudiar Yun Jihai worked frantically in the underground research facility beneath New Seoul. The secret base was hidden 3 miles under the city where Council sensors could not detect it. For 20 years, human scientists had been taking apart every piece of alien technology they could find. They studied Council weapons, ships, and computers until they knew them better than the aliens who made them. The human scientists were different from alien researchers. When aliens found new technology, they used it exactly as it was designed, but humans always asked the same question: how can we make this better? They took Council science and improved it in ways that shocked even themselves. Captain Nam Soo-jin prepared her stealth fleet in the hidden base on the dark side of the moon. The human ships looked rough and ugly compared to the beautiful Council vessels, but looks could be deceiving. Human engineers cared more about what worked than what looked pretty. They had built ships that could fight better than anything the Council had ever seen. The stealth ships used a new type of technology that made them invisible to Council sensors. The aliens had never seen anything like it because they always followed the same old designs. Humans had taken their cloaking technology and made it 10 times better by combining it with human engineering. The first attack came without any warning. Council ships began exploding across their formation as missiles appeared from nowhere. The weapons were not just powerful, they were smart. Each missile knew exactly what kind of ship it was attacking and how to hurt it. The humans had spent years studying every Council species, learning their weaknesses and the flaws in their technology. The Zenthari ships had weak spots in their energy shields. The Kickstar vessels could not handle certain frequencies. The Velnari ships had computer systems that could be hacked easily. Admiral Oh Seung-wan watched from the command ship as panic spread through the Council ranks. The alien formations broke apart as captains tried to save their ships from weapons they could not see or understand. Council commanders screamed orders at their crews, but no one knew how to fight an enemy they could not find. The Council had expected to fight primitive humans with basic weapons. Instead, they found themselves being destroyed by technology that was better than their own. The human attack was not random or chaotic, it was planned and precise like a surgeon cutting out a tumor. What scared the council most was not the human weapons, but the human attitude. Other species would have stopped fighting after proving they were strong enough to defend themselves. They would have asked for peace, talks, or tried to negotiate better terms, but humans were different. The humans kept attacking with cold determination. They were not fighting to get better treatment from the council, they were fighting to destroy the council completely. This was something the aliens had never seen before. Most species fought until they could get a good deal, but humans fought until they won. Captain Lee Dong-woo led a squadron of fighter ships through the council formation. His pilots moved like they had been training for this battle their whole lives, which they had. Human children grew up hearing stories about the day they would have to fight for their freedom. Every human pilot knew this day would come. The council tried to use their superior numbers to overwhelm the human forces, but it did not work. Human ships were faster and more maneuverable than council vessels. They could dodge alien weapons while hitting targets that should have been impossible to reach. Lieutenant Commander Park Ji-min coordinated the attack from the tactical center. She had studied every council battle for the past 20 years, and she knew exactly how they would respond to each human move. The aliens were predictable because they had been winning for so long they had forgotten how to adapt. The human attack was like a deadly dance. Each ship knew exactly where to go and what to do. The pilots had practiced these moves thousands of times in simulation, but this was the first time they could use them in real combat. They were excited and terrified at the same time. The council fleet that had seemed so powerful an hour before was now in full retreat. Dozens of their ships had been destroyed and hundreds more were damaged. The humans had not lost a single vessel. The battle was so one-sided that it shocked both sides. Supreme Chancellor Valthera could not believe what was happening. Her mighty fleet was being torn apart by humans who were supposed to be weak and primitive. She ordered her remaining ships to retreat to a safe distance. While she tried to figure out what had gone wrong, the humans did not chase the fleeing council ships. Instead, they formed a protective barrier around Earth and waited. The message was clear: Earth belonged to humans, and anyone who wanted to take it would have to fight for it. News of the council defeat spread across the galaxy faster than light. Every species that had been conquered by the council watched in amazement as humans did what no one thought was possible. They had not just survived a council attack, they had won. The victory was more than military, it was psychological. For the first time in 1,000 years, the council looked weak and vulnerable. Species across the galaxy began to wonder if they too could stand up to their alien overlords. The humans had shown the galaxy that the council could be beaten. Now they had to prove that they could keep winning. The real war was just beginning, and everyone knew that the council would come back with everything they had, but the humans were ready. They had been preparing for this war their whole lives, and they were not going to stop until every species in the galaxy was free. The council had made the mistake of threatening humanity, and now they would pay the price. The galaxy would never be the same again. News of the council defeat traveled through the galaxy like wildfire, spreading across dry grass. Every alien species that had been ruled by the council for generations watched their communication screens in total shock. The mighty council fleet that had never lost a battle had been destroyed by humans who were supposed to be weak and primitive. President Bae Young-ho stood before the United Earth Assembly in the Great Hall in Geneva. His voice was calm, but his words shook the foundations of galactic civilization. The council had given humanity two choices: submit or be destroyed. But humans had chosen a third option that nobody thought was possible. They had chosen to fight back, and when the president told the assembled representatives that this was only the beginning, the council would not give up. After one defeat, they would return with bigger fleets and more powerful weapons. But humans were ready for whatever came next. They had been preparing for this war since the day they first met. Aliens Commander Shin RM led the first ground assault team to attack a council base on the moon of Kepler 442b. The human soldiers moved through the alien corridors like ghosts in the night. Their adaptive armor let them survive in environments that would kill most species. But what impressed their enemies most was how quickly humans could learn. The council defenders had set up their base according to standard military doctrine that had worked for centuries, but humans did not follow standard doctrine. They analyzed the alien defenses in real time and found ways to defeat them that the Council had never seen before. The human soldiers did not just fight better than the aliens expected, they fought smarter. Every Council defensive position was designed to stop enemies who attacked in predictable ways, but humans attacked from directions that made no sense to alien minds. They used tactics that seemed crazy but worked perfectly. Lieutenant Kim Yuna led her squad through the base ventilation system while another team created a distraction at the main entrance. The aliens concentrated their forces to stop the obvious attack while humans snuck in through routes that Council engineers never thought anyone would use. The base fell in less than 3 hours and the human soldiers captured hundreds of alien prisoners. But what happened next shocked the galaxy even more. Instead of killing or torturing their captives, the humans gave them medical treatment and comfortable quarters. The Council had told every species in the galaxy that humans were violent savages who would destroy civilization if they were not controlled. But the human soldiers treated their prisoners with kindness and respect. They shared their food and medicine with wounded aliens and even helped them contact their families. The Council propaganda machine went into overdrive, trying to convince the galaxy that humans were dangerous monsters who would bring chaos and death to peaceful worlds, but their message was being destroyed by human actions. Wherever humans went, they showed mercy to the innocent and protection to the weak. Lieutenant Colonel Park Sumin established the first human diplomatic outpost in the Vega system. Her mission was to contact alien species that had been quietly unhappy under Council rule. The response was overwhelming. Entire civilizations began sending secret messages to humanity, asking for help. The Corvani were the first to openly break away from Council control. Their ambassador announced that his people would no longer obey Council orders and would fight for their freedom. Alongside humanity, within hours, 6 more species made similar announcements. The Council found themselves facing something they had never encountered before: a rebellion that was spreading faster than they could stop it. Human forces were not just winning battles, they were inspiring others to join their cause. The galaxy was beginning to realize that the Council 1,000-year reign might finally be ending, but the Council was not going to give up without a fight. They began moving massive fleets from across the galaxy toward human space. They called up reserves that had not been used in centuries and activated weapons that had been forbidden for generations. The alien leaders held emergency meetings on their homeworlds, trying to figure out how to stop the human rebellion. Some Council members wanted to negotiate and find a peaceful solution, but the majority were too proud and too angry to consider anything except total war. Supreme Chancellor Velthera addressed the Council assembly with fire in her eyes. She declared that the human rebellion would be crushed no matter what the cost. The Council would use every weapon in their arsenal to destroy humanity and any species that helped them. The Chancellor announced that the Council was activating Protocol 7, the most extreme military response in their history. Entire sectors would be placed under martial law, and any species that showed sympathy for the human cause would be considered enemies of the state. But the Council threats only made more species want to join the rebellion. The Drixie declared independence from Council rule. The Nalith announced they would fight alongside humanity. The Vervik sent their entire fleet to help defend human colonies. Dar Choi Yunji worked with refugee scientists from 12 different species in the research station orbiting Mars. The alien researchers were amazed by human willingness to share knowledge freely. The Council had always kept scientific advances secret, using them to maintain power over other species. The human approach was completely different. They treated knowledge as something that belonged to everyone. When alien scientists shared their discoveries with humans, they got back even better technology improved by human engineering. The cooperation was creating advances that neither side could have achieved alone. The galaxy watched in wonder as humans risked their lives to save people they had never met. Captain Song Kyung-mi led relief missions to worlds that were being punished by the Council for supporting the rebellion. Human ships carried medicine, food, and supplies to starving populations, while evacuation fleets rescued civilians from war zones. The contrast between Council brutality and human compassion was impossible to ignore. The Council responded to rebellion with orbital bombardments, that killed millions of innocent people. Humans responded with mercy missions that saved lives and brought hope to desperate worlds. Major Jung Woo-sung intercepted council communications that revealed how desperate the alien leaders had become. They were losing control of nearly a quarter of their territory, and their remaining forces were spread too thin to maintain order everywhere. The council was facing the collapse of their empire, and they knew it, but instead of seeking peace, they were planning something that would change the nature of the war completely. They were going to use weapons that had been banned by every civilized species in the galaxy. The human rebellion had started as a fight for Earth freedom, but it was becoming something much bigger. It was becoming a war for the liberation of the entire galaxy, and the Council was about to show just how far they would go to maintain their power. General Lim Junho stood in the Mogul Command Center studying the holographic star map that showed the current state of the war. Human forces had captured 17 council systems and were advancing on 3 more, but the real victory was not military. It was something much more important. The council aura of invincibility had been completely shattered. Alien species across the galaxy were beginning to believe that freedom was possible for the first time in 1,000 years. The psychological effect of human victories was spreading faster than the military advances. The Corvani had been the first to officially break away from council control, but they were not alone anymore. The Drixi announced their independence, followed by the Naloth. Then the Vervek. Within days of each other, 6 more species declared that they would no longer accept council rule. Ambassador Kang Sora worked around the clock trying to coordinate with all the new allies that were joining the rebellion. Every day brought messages from more species asking for help or offering to fight alongside humanity. The galactic rebellion was growing so fast that it was hard to keep track of everyone. The council response was swift and brutal. They began orbital bombardments of rebellious worlds, destroying entire cities to make examples of species that dared to defy them. Millions of innocent aliens died in the attacks, but the council brutality only made more species want to join the rebellion. Dr. Choi Eun-ji worked with refugee scientists from dozens of different species in the research stations that had been established throughout human space. The alien researchers were amazed by human willingness to share knowledge and technology freely. What surprised the alien scientists most was how humans approached research. They did not just study existing technology, they constantly asked how it could be improved or used in new ways. Human creativity combined with alien knowledge was producing innovations that neither side could have achieved alone. The research teams were developing new weapons and defenses faster than the council could adapt to them. Every time the council found a way to counter human technology, the mixed human-alien teams would create something even better. Captain Song Kyung-mi led the humanitarian relief missions that had become one of the most important parts of the human war effort. Her ships carried medical supplies, food, and equipment to worlds that were being punished by the council for supporting the rebellion. The relief missions were dangerous because council forces often attacked the unarmed humanitarian ships, but Captain Song and her crews kept flying their missions because they knew that saving lives was just as important as winning battles. The galaxy watched in amazement as humans risked everything to help people they had never met. The council called humans violent and dangerous, but human actions showed species after species that humans valued all life. The contrast between council cruelty and human compassion was impossible to ignore. Lieutenant Commander Yoon Soo established communication networks that allowed rebellious species to coordinate their resistance efforts. The council had always controlled galactic communications, but humans had developed new technologies that could not be blocked or monitored. The communication networks allowed rebel leaders to share intelligence, plan joint operations, and coordinate supply lines. The council found themselves fighting not just individual species, but a unified alliance that was growing stronger every day. Major Jung Woo-sung worked in the intelligence division analyzing intercepted council communications. What he discovered made him realize that the war was reaching a critical turning point. The council was losing control of their empire faster than anyone had expected. The intercepted messages revealed that council forces were spread too thin to maintain order everywhere. They were pulling troops from peaceful systems to fight the rebellion, which only gave more species opportunities to declare independence. The Council was also facing internal problems. Some Council species were beginning to question whether the war was worth fighting. Members of the Council Assembly were arguing about whether to seek peace or continue the brutal crackdown, but the most disturbing intelligence came from the Council highest levels. They were planning to use weapons that had been banned by every civilized species in the galaxy. The Council was so desperate to maintain power that they were willing to destroy entire star systems. The intelligence reports mentioned something called the Void Makers, ancient weapons that could collapse stars into black holes, destroying everything in entire solar systems. The Council had promised never to use these weapons, but their desperation was making them consider the unthinkable. Captain Ru Hansu commanded the fastest reconnaissance ships in the human fleet. His mission was to locate the Void Makers and find out how close the Council was to activating them. The intelligence suggested that the weapons were being prepared in secret locations throughout Council space. The search for the Void Makers became the most important mission of the war, because everyone knew that if the Council was willing to destroy entire star systems, they would target human colonies first. The weapons could kill billions of people in minutes. General Lim realized that the war was entering a new phase. The Council was no longer trying to reconquer their lost territory. They were trying to destroy anyone who opposed them. The rebellion had pushed the Council so far that they were willing to commit genocide to maintain power. The human military began preparing for the possibility that the Council would use the Void Makers against Earth itself. Emergency evacuation plans were developed to move as many people as possible to hidden colonies in case the worst happened. But humans were not the only ones who were worried about the Void Makers. Every species in the galaxy knew the stories about what these weapons could do. Even some Council species were horrified by the possibility that their leaders might actually use them. The war had started as a fight between humans and the Council, but it was becoming something much bigger. It was becoming a fight for the survival of galactic civilization itself. If the Council was willing to destroy entire star systems, no one in the galaxy would be safe. The rebellion against the Council was no longer just about freedom. It was about preventing the complete destruction of everything that countless species had built over thousands of years. The stakes had never been higher, and everyone knew that the next phase of the war would decide the fate of the galaxy. The Council desperation was making them more dangerous than ever before, but it was also making them more vulnerable. Species that had supported the Council for generations were beginning to turn against them as news of the Void Makers spread. The turning point of the war was approaching, and everyone could feel it. The next few battles would determine whether the galaxy would be free or whether the Council would destroy everything rather than lose their power. The human rebellion had lit a fire that was spreading across the galaxy, and now everyone had to decide whether they would help put out the flames of tyranny or watch the galaxy burn. The Council's final plan was more terrible than anyone had imagined. If they could not keep control of the galaxy through military might, they would use the most feared weapons in galactic history. The Void Makers were ancient devices that had been banned by every civilized species because they could destroy entire star systems by turning them into black holes. Supreme Chancellor Velthera made the decision in a secret meeting with the Council inner circle. They would activate the first Void Maker at the human colony world of New Bizen, which was home to 5 million humans and 2 million alien refugees who had fled Council brutality. The plan was simple and horrifying. The Council would announce that any species supporting the rebellion would meet the same fate as New Bizen. They believed that the fear of total destruction would force everyone back under Council control. Intelligence Officer Liu Jin was monitoring Council communications when she intercepted the activation codes. For the Void Maker, she had less than 6 hours to warn the colony and organize an evacuation before the weapon would charge up enough to destroy the entire star system. The message went out immediately to every human ship in the galaxy. Captain Ru Hyunsu commanded the fastest ship in the human fleet, and he pushed his engines beyond safe limits, racing toward New Bizen. The entire human navy followed behind him, knowing they might be flying into a trap. What they found when they reached the New Bizen system was worse than their worst nightmares. Council had positioned their most powerful fleet around the colony world with the Voidmaker floating in the center. Like a crystal mountain of death, the Voidmaker was unlike anything humans had ever seen. It was a massive construct of black crystal that seemed to bend space around itself. Stars looked twisted and distorted when viewed through the area around the weapon. The device was already charging up in reality. Itself seemed to be breaking apart near it. The Council fleet surrounding the Voidmaker was the largest force they had ever assembled. Ships from every Council species were positioned in perfect formation, ready to defend the weapon until it could complete its charging sequence. Admiral Park Sang-ho took command of the human fleet as more ships arrived from across the galaxy. The humans were outnumbered 10-1, but they had no choice except to attack. The Voidmaker had to be stopped before it could destroy 5 million innocent lives. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Council forces fought with the desperation of cornered animals while humans pressed forward with cold fury. They knew that if the Voidmaker activated, it would set a precedent that would make the Council even more dangerous. Engineer Kim Min-young worked frantically on the flagship, trying to analyze the Voidmaker structure while the battle raged around her. The device was unlike anything in human experience, but she recognized certain patterns from her studies of Council technology. The Voidmaker was based on the same energy principles as Council shields and weapons, but scaled up to an unimaginable degree. If she could find the right frequency, she might be able to disrupt its operation, but she would need to get close enough to scan it properly. Captain Nam Soo-jin led a squadron of stealth ships through the Council formation, trying to get close enough to the Voidmaker for Engineer Kim to take detailed readings. The Council defenders were so focused on the main battle that they did not notice the small ships slipping through their lines. The readings showed that the Voidmaker was more unstable than anyone had realized. The weapon was so powerful that it was barely contained by its own structure. If the containment field was disrupted in just the right way, the weapon might destroy itself instead of the star system, but getting close enough to disrupt the containment field meant flying directly into the energy field that surrounded the Voidmaker. Any ship that got too close would be torn apart by the same forces that were meant to collapse the Star. Lieutenant Colonel Cho Dae-hyun volunteered to lead the suicide mission to destroy the Voidmaker. He selected a crew of volunteers who knew they would not survive the mission but were willing to die to save millions of innocent lives. Small ship accelerated toward the Voidmaker while the battle continued around them. Council forces tried to intercept the ship, but human fighters held them off long enough for the suicide mission to reach the weapon engineer. Kim had calculated that a precise explosion at exactly the right point would cause a resonance cascade that would destroy the Voidmaker, but the timing had to be perfect. If the explosion happened too early or too late, it would not work. The ship reached the Voidmaker just as the weapon was approaching full charge. The energy field around the device was so intense that the ship hull began to melt, but Lieutenant Colonel Cho held course toward the target point. Explosion that followed lit up the entire star system as the Voidmaker tore itself apart in a cascade of released energy. The destruction was so massive that it disabled every Council ship in the system and sent shockwaves through hyperspace that could be felt across the galaxy. The sacrifice of Lieutenant Colonel Cho and his crew had saved not just the New Bizan colony, but had shown the galaxy that the Council was willing to commit genocide to maintain their power. The political effect was immediate and devastating. Species that had remained neutral in the rebellion were horrified by the Council attempt to use the Voidmakers. Even some Council species began to question whether their leaders had gone too far. The attempted genocide turned galactic opinion completely against the Council. The Council had hoped that the threat of the Voidmakers would force everyone to submit to their rule. Instead, the attempt to use the weapons had united the entire galaxy against them. The rebellion was no longer about human freedom, it was about preventing the Council from destroying civilization. News of the Voidmaker spread to every corner of the galaxy. Within hours of the weapon destruction, dozens of new species announced their independence from Council rule. The Council Empire was collapsing faster than anyone had thought possible. The human victory at New Bizan became the symbol of resistance against tyranny. The story of Lieutenant Colonel Cho's sacrifice inspired countless beings across the galaxy to stand up against the Council oppression. Supreme Chancellor Valthera realized that the Council gamble had failed completely. Instead of forcing submission, the Void Maker had turned the entire galaxy against them. The Council was now fighting for survival rather than trying to maintain their empire. The remaining Council forces began retreating toward their core worlds, abandoning outer territories that they could no longer defend. The 1,000-year empire was crumbling, and everyone knew it, but the humans were not interested in becoming the new galactic overlords. They had something better in mind. The galaxy needed a new system of government based on cooperation rather than domination. The war was nearly over, but the real work of building a free galaxy was just beginning. The Council desperation had nearly destroyed everything, but human courage and sacrifice had saved the day. The galaxy would never forget the price that had been paid for freedom, and they would never again allow anyone to threaten the peace that so many had died to achieve. The destruction of the Voidmaker sent shockwaves through the galaxy that went far beyond the massive explosion that had lit up the new Bizon system. Engineer Kim Min-young's desperate plan had not only destroyed the terrible weapon but had created a resonance cascade that disabled every Council ship in the system. The Council fleet that had seemed so powerful just hours before was now floating helplessly in space. Their weapons were dead, their shields were down, and their engines would not start. The same energy that was meant to destroy a star system had instead destroyed the Council ability to fight. In the aftermath of the battle, Admiral Park Sang-ho found himself accepting the surrender of the remaining Council forces. The once mighty empire that had dominated the galaxy for over 1,000 years was reduced to a handful of core worlds and a broken fleet. The Supreme Chancellor Valthara was captured along with most of the Council leadership they had bet everything on the Void Maker and lost completely. The galaxy watched as the proud alien leaders were taken into custody by the humans they had tried to destroy, but the humans were not interested in becoming the new galactic overlords. They had fought for freedom, not for power. The idea of ruling over other species was completely against everything humans believed in. Ambassador Yoon Sung-ah was chosen to lead the negotiations for a new form of galactic government. She worked with representatives from over 100 different species to create something that had never existed before, a truly democratic galactic alliance. The new government would be called the Galactic Liberation Alliance, and it would be based on cooperation rather than domination. Each species would keep its independence while working together for mutual benefit. No single species would have the power to control others. The transition was not easy. Centuries of Council rule had left many species dependent on their former masters for technology, guidance, and protection. They did not know how to govern themselves after being slaves for so long, but humans approached this challenge the same way they had approached the war, with determination and creativity. They shared their knowledge freely, helped rebuild devastated worlds, and offered protection to species that needed it. The human approach was completely different from the Council way of doing things. Instead of hoarding technology and using it to control others, humans treated knowledge as something that should be shared with everyone. Director Jang Hyo-rin established the first galactic university on the former Council capital world. The massive institution was dedicated to preserving and sharing knowledge from all species. The goal was to make sure that the kind of technological control that had maintained Council power could never happen again. Students from across the galaxy came to the university to learn and to teach. The mixing of different species and cultures created an explosion of creativity and innovation that amazed everyone. New discoveries were being made every day as different ways of thinking combined. The university became a symbol of the new galactic order, where diversity was celebrated rather than suppressed. Species that had been enemies under Council rule now worked together on projects that benefited everyone, but not everyone was happy with the new system. Some species that had been privileged under Council rule resented losing their special status. A few former Council worlds tried to maintain their old ways, but they found themselves isolated and ignored. The majority of the galaxy embraced the new freedom with enthusiasm. Species that had been oppressed for centuries were finally able to express their cultures and pursue their own interests. The galaxy became more colorful and diverse than it had ever been. Trade flourished as barriers between species were removed. New trade routes opened up, connecting worlds that had never been allowed to communicate under council rule. The galactic economy grew stronger as more species participated freely. The military forces of the new alliance were organized very differently from the old council armies. Instead of conquest forces designed to crush rebellions, the new military was focused on defense and peacekeeping. Captain Li Dongwu was promoted to admiral and put in charge of the new Galactic Defense Force. The military was made up of volunteers from all species working together to protect the alliance from external threats. The former council species were not punished for their past actions. Instead, they were welcomed into the new alliance as equal partners. Many of them had been victims of their own government oppression, and they were grateful for the chance to start over. The healing process took years as species that had been enemies learned to trust each other, but the shared experience of liberation created bonds that grew stronger. Over time, the galaxy began to feel like a true community rather than a collection of conquered territories. President Bai Young-ho was elected as the first leader of the Galactic Liberation Alliance, but his power was limited by a constitution that prevented any single person or species from gaining too much control. The lessons of the council rule had been learned well. The new government was not perfect, and there were many problems to solve. Different species had different ideas about how things should be done, and disagreements were common, but the important thing was that problems were solved through discussion and compromise rather than force. Years passed, and the galaxy settled into its new peaceful routine. The scars of the war began to heal as former enemies became friends and allies. The Council Empire was remembered as a dark chapter in galactic history that must never be repeated. Ambassador Li Su-yun stood on the observation deck of the Galactic University looking out over the thriving multicultural city that had grown around the campus. Students from hundreds of different species walked the streets, together sharing ideas and building friendships. She remembered the dark days when the Council had threatened to destroy humanity and turn them into slaves. The galaxy had seemed hopeless then, with no way to escape the endless cycle of oppression and control, but humans had refused to accept that fate. They had shown the galaxy that freedom was possible, and that working together was better than fighting each other. The Council had thought they were dealing with just another species to be conquered. Instead, they had awakened something that changed the galaxy forever. The human spirit of independence and cooperation had spread to every corner of the galaxy, creating a new age of peace and prosperity. The Council had threatened humanity, expecting submission and fear. Instead, they had discovered that humans did not just refuse to be conquered, they refused to let anyone else be conquered either. The galaxy was finally free, and it was more beautiful than anyone had ever imagined. The diversity of species, cultures, and ideas created a richness that had been impossible under council rule. Children of all species grew up together, learning from each other and building friendships that crossed the old boundaries. The future looked brighter than it had ever looked before. The human rebellion had started as a desperate fight for survival, but it had become something much greater. It had become the foundation for a new kind of galactic civilization based on freedom, cooperation, and respect for all life. The galaxy owed its freedom to the courage of ordinary humans who had refused to surrender. When faced with impossible odds, their sacrifice had created a better world for everyone, and in the end, that was the most human thing of all.